Hello everybody, and welcome to this video in which we are going to be talking about something very different today. It's an import-only title from Japan for the Nintendo Switch, but because it is very import-friendly and you don't really need to be able to understand or speak Japanese to enjoy it, it's an easy one for us to recommend. It's called Minna no Hanafuda, which roughly translates as Everybody's Hanafuda, and as the name suggests, it's a take on the classic Japanese card game Hanafuda, and in particular Koi Koi. Amazingly enough, there are actually quite a few different ways to play Koi Koi now if you're into your video games. The Yakuza series regularly features it as a minigame, as does the recently released Sakura Wars on PlayStation 4. Or, if you want to wait for Clubhouse games on the Nintendo Switch, it will include Koi Koi as one of the game options there. However, these are all just minigames, and while they are genuinely well done, and do play a good game of Koi Koi, there is something to be said about having a dedicated version of it. It's a little like chess really. Clubhouse games, for example, will have chess as well, but for people that want to test themselves against proper and dedicated AI, or just enjoy higher production values for that particular game, it's just as well that there's a dedicated chess app out there as well. This Hanafuda game also falls into that same boat. Now, you may not have played Koi Koi or any of the other games that use the Hanafuda deck of cards before, and don't worry if you haven't. This card game isn't exactly a mainstream thing in the West, and they don't exactly have clubs for people to come and play Koi Koi. However, it is a useful thing to learn how to play, not necessarily because you will get to play it when you're out and about, but because there is a deeply Japanese sense about these games, and learning how to play it will help you to deepen your understanding of that culture just a little bit. So for example, if you look at the construction of the deck itself, rather than have numbers and the Jack, Queen, King of a standard Western deck, you'll see pictures instead. At first, these pictures are going to seem overwhelmingly abstract, but trust me on this, stick with it, because as you play them you start to recognize what each of those pictures and symbols mean, and with familiarity comes a comfort with just how elegant this deck of cards is. There are 12 suits in a Hanafuda deck, each one has 4 cards, and each of those suits represents one month of the year. Why? Because the Japanese culture is particularly enamored with the idea of each month having a different aesthetic, texture, and tone. Now, having spent quite a lot of time in Japan myself, it really is a country of 12 months, and seeing that reflected through the cards is just so much more appealing than the standard playing cards and the relatively boring way that they depict numbers. Now, the actual game of Koi Koi is easier to learn than you might think. You'll probably flounder for the first couple of rounds, and don't worry, we all do. But after that, some of the basic strategies and play techniques will become clear. So you remember how I mentioned earlier that there are 12 suits, each with 4 cards? The basic principle of the game is to match the cards that you have in your hand with the cards that are in the middle of the table that are off the same month. Your goal is to match up specific combinations of the more valuable cards, at which point you have the choice to Koi Koi, which means continue playing on to try and make more combinations, or you end the round and score your points. That's really all there is to Koi Koi, it is that simple. The challenge is in remembering what the various combinations are, but there's only around a dozen of them, so after you play a couple of rounds it becomes quite easy to actually remember those. And really, it's not that different to trying to remember that 5 cards of the same suit is a seriously good poker hand, or that ideally you want to try and get a run of 5 consecutive numbers if you can. The comparison that I make to poker is actually quite apt, because in Japan, Koi Koi was seen as something of a game for the Yakuza, just as poker was seen as a mafia thing in the West. That perception is changing now, just as it did for poker, but there are definite gambling elements in Koi Koi. Choosing to Koi Koi itself is a huge risk, because while you do have the potential to get a lot of points by doing so, if your opponent then completes a set before you can, they get all the points and you get nothing whatsoever. There are 12 rounds in a standard game of Koi Koi, again because of 12 months in the year, and I tell you what, when you get to those 10th, 11th and 12th rounds, it can get very intense indeed, with players taking some huge risks to try and get the points they need. Minna no Hanafuda plays a really lovely game of Koi Koi, to bring it back to the topic of this video and the actual game that I'm playing here on the screen. It's also a really useful one for beginners. So on your turn, if you've got a card that can make a match with one of the cards on the playfield, that card is actually highlighted to show that you can make the match. The game won't actually help you form sets, but learning how to form sets on your own is the quickest way to learn how to play the game. However, it does give you help in learning to recognize which suit each card belongs to, which is actually the most frustrating thing that a lot of new players to Koi Koi have. Now, my recommendation is to play the game with a printout of the various winning hands next to you to refer to as you learn. You will be surprised how quickly you learn which combinations to go for, and more importantly perhaps, how to spot the warning signs that your opponent is about to win a hand themselves. Because while it sounds like quite the simple game, there's a surprising amount of strategy involved in Hanafuda, and it's largely to do with how to play defensively. For example, there's one card that you really want to learn to look out for immediately, and that's the Moon. The Moon makes some very high scoring combinations with just a few cards, and it's basically as powerful as having an ace in poker. You might not have a Moon in your hand, or it might not be in the middle of the playfield initially, but if there's another card from the December month in the playfield, with the Moon is also a December card, you really want to try and get that December card out of play as quickly as you can, just in case your opponent has a Moon themselves. One of the advantages of Minna no Hanafuda as a dedicated Koi Koi app is that there is a greater range of AI to test yourself against. A game like Clubhouse games would likely only have 3 difficulty settings: easy, medium, hard. At a stretch there might be a 4th. Minna no Hanafuda has 8 or so, and they range from very amateur, where they will make such amateur mistakes that they won't even play the Moon, through to what is effectively professional standard play. While there's a lot of luck involved in Koi Koi, it does feel like the AI is programmed right in this app. In that, as you escalate the difficulty, the AI just makes better decisions, rather than magically getting better cards. Sometimes when you play a Koi Koi mini-game, it feels like the AI is just, cheating their way through to victory. That's not the case with this one. Now, right at the start of the video, I did say that this was an import-friendly game, and I just want to re-emphasize that it is very import-friendly. You probably do see a bit of Japanese text there on the screen as I'm playing, but for the most part it's not a concern. It's mostly to do with the various types of hands that you can win, and you don't really need to know what they are called. As long as you know what the Koi Koi is, which is the blue button when it pops up, so you know how to end a hand early or to play on, that's really the only bit of Japanese text that you need to deal with. The menu at the front end of the game is really lovely and clean, just don't mess around with the settings you don't need to. And you can get into a game within about 4 button presses. This is a cut price game, so there's no narrative or anything like that to deal with. So even if you do putter around in the menus a bit, you're not going to get too lost. It is very clean, very simple, and very minimalist. The presentation of the game though is just gorgeous. I have a real thing for Hanafuda decks. I've got about a dozen of them now, ranging from the standard cards through to Dragon Quest, Pokemon and Moomin themed ones. And that ukiyo-e art style is what always hooks me in. The game does a great job of rendering all of that, as well as leaving a tactile impression on what it's like to actually touch and feel and handle the cards. Hanafuda cards are a hard card as opposed to the flexible playing cards that we have in the West. And subtle as it is, the movement of these cards in this game across the play space is just spot on for the Hanafuda aesthetic. The tatami mat touch is a nice touch as well, so when you play this game in Japan, you do traditionally play it while sitting down in a Japanese floor, which is often, tatami mat lined. So all of those little aesthetic tricks really go to make this game feel very authentic. The music as well is very lovely and calming and soothing, which is perfect for this kind of game. Now, of course, this is almost certainly not going to come out in the West. There is very little market for this kind of game. And while the Switch does have a couple of odd ports of very Japanese things, like for example there is a Shogi game that was released a couple of months ago, I just don't see this one coming out. Especially when Nintendo has Clubhouse games come in, and once again Hanafuda is in Clubhouse games, so you can play it as part of that package if you want to. I'm not sure I would recommend it though, because as much as I do love Clubhouse games, and I haven't actually played the Switch one I should say, This is based on the 3DS one. But it looks to be very similar from the previews that I've seen. As much as I do love Clubhouse games, the implementation of some of these games is very limited. And with Koi Koi in particular, the lack of AI diversity really does hurt the game as a separate thing. You might play it a couple of rounds, but you're not going to get really stuck into it. There are other games in Clubhouse games which are perhaps a little bit more lasting. So Minna no Hanafuda will set you back 1,980 yen, which works out at about $20 depending on your national currency. Once you do exchange rates and stuff, it's about $20. And it is really worth that. I've already played about 5 or 6 hours of this thing. It's a very easy to play game while you're doing other things as well, like watching TV or whatever. It's very relaxing. And it's just that it's one of those kinds of games that you want to have on your Switch, so you can pull it up whenever you feel like, a short game. Any individual game of Hanafuda or Koi Koi only lasts for about 10 minutes at most, so, it's one of those ones that just, it's very easy to pick up and play. And I haven't really got much else to say about Koi Koi or Minna no Hanafuda or the game in general. If there is anybody who watches this channel that is a fan of Hanafuda, let me know. Let's get some games going. I love this game and would love to play it a lot more. Otherwise, thank you as always for watching. Please do like and subscribe if you enjoy my videos, that way you won't miss any of them. And if you do like my stuff, please do consider backing me on Patreon, because even $1 a month is a huge help with what I want to do with this channel, and that obviously ends up benefiting you as well, because I've got so much stuff that I can do yet. And yeah, we'll see you at the next video.